Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. We will start off with the second episode of the social Sharia. You would be recalling the fact that we had been studying, or we started to study the social Sharia in our last lecture. We had studied the marriage and relations prohibited for marriage in the last session. This is a relatively longish chapter of Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi, so this is also another reminder for you that basically Meezan is a book that he has written or wrote about 15 years ago on his own understanding of Islam. The book has been revised several times and we are studying its latest edition. So the social Sharia is under discussion. I have also pointed this out that the sequence that we have adopted in discussing the chapters of the book is not the same in which they have been arranged in the book. We have selected various chapters, but ultimately, once we are complete, we will arrange the lectures in the format of the book itself. So today we are going to study the third topic, and this relates to the bounds and conditions of nikah or marriage. The Quranic verse that relates to this particular issue is now being displayed before you. Just going to read out the translation. And all of the women except for those specified are lawful to you, such that you seek them through your wealth, desiring chastity, not lust. Consequently, if you have not paid their dowers as yet, pay them their dowers as your obligation for the benefit you have derived for them. If after a dower is prescribed, you agree mutually on something, there is no blame on you, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. So the first condition which you can see is mentioned here is the fact that nikah has to be conducted through the payment of wealth to the bride, and this of course relates to the fact that she is given a certain amount of money at the time of marriage. And this is called meher in the Urdu language, it is called sadaqah in Arabic, it is called dower in the English language. Basically, it is a certain amount which the husband pledges and also gives at the time of marriage to the wife, and this is a symbolism of the fact that he has taken up the responsibility to cater for her needs and to look after her once the marriage starts. So basically, we have to understand that the responsibility for earning for the family is imposed on the husband in the setup which has been proposed by Islam, and therefore when the husband marries the wife, he gives this amount to her as a token and as a pledge to the fact and as a symbolism to the fact that he has taken this responsibility of financially running the affairs of the house and of course giving the wife her own maintenance and residence. So the important area, an important thing here is that meher or dower is something which has to be paid. It actually brings seriosity to the marriage and it is one of the conditions of marriage. So this condition of marriage is something that is absolutely of paramount importance. Some things that have been mentioned in this verse also, one particular thing is that if there is this agreement between the husband and wife regarding certain marriage, as you can see, the last part of the verse says, if after a dower is prescribed, you agree mutually on something, there is no blame on you. This means that if something of the amount is reduced by the wife that she might have pledged for the husband to give her, then this is something that is acceptable. So if the wife forgoes a part of the amount or maybe makes an adjustment, it is okay, but this is once the agreement has been made, of course, between the husband and wife. This cannot be unilateral by the husband. It cannot be done unilaterally by him. The amount has to be paid by the husband at all cost. As far as this amount is concerned, at other instances in the Quran, we know the word maruf is used, which means that it is according to the customs of the society. So the status of the husband, as well as the status of the wife herself, she can demand a certain amount of dower, and it is no shame if she does so, because this would, on her part, ensure that the husband is really serious in supporting her. So as far as supporting the wife is concerned, this is something which is a very important condition in marriage. This, of course, does not mean that the wife cannot earn for herself in any way, or she is restricted in such matters. No, not at all. If she wants, she can earn. If she wants, she can just do whatever she likes. But she is not responsible for earning for the family. On the other hand, the husband is definitely responsible for earning for the family. We will be discussing the family setup in one of the later sections, and it will become evident how important it is that this meher must be given at the time of marriage. So generally the custom in our marriages is that it is deferred, or a very small part is paid at the time of marriage, and a greater part of it is just deferred, and it is usually given when the issue of divorce arises, if at all. So the important thing here is that in such circumstances, the husbands have to understand that the philosophy of this tower is that it has to be given, it must be given at the time of marriage, because it is the philosophy of this is that the husband is showing his serious intent, his commitment, that he is going to be the financially responsible person for his wife. So the other important thing which is mentioned here is also clearly seen in the translation of the word. It says, desiring chastity and not lust. And in this regard, I would like to read out what Ustaz has written in his book. He says that the second requisite of marriage stated in the verse is chastity. No adulterer has the right to marry a chaste woman, and no adulteress has the right to marry a chaste man, except if the matter has not gone to the court and the two purify themselves of their sin by sincere repentance. So the words are muhsinina ghayra musafihin, which means that they desire chastity and not lust. So in other words, women have to understand, and in fact men and women who get married have to understand, the second important condition is that the two people who are getting married, they must not be people who have been convicted by law of adultery. Of course, if there has been some blemish on the personal level and the matter has not reached the courts, then it is fine. But if the verdict of the court has been pronounced and one of the two has been declared as an adulterer, then the Quran says that the people who have committed adultery, they cannot marry people who are chaste. So the Quranic verse in this regard is now being displayed before you. It says, "Az-zani la yankih illa zaniyatan aw mushrika, wa zaniyatu la yankihha illa zanin aw mushrik, wa hurrima zalika ala al-mu'minin." The man guilty of fornication may only marry a woman similarly guilty or an idolatress, and the woman guilty of fornication may only marry such a man or an idolater. The believers are forbidden such marriages. So these are the important areas that have to be understood as far as marriage is concerned. In this regard, the Quran has said that marrying the people of the book, of course, is something that it has been allowed in certain stipulations, in certain conditions. But as far as people who are idolaters, who are professed idolaters, who take up idolatry as a considered religion, about them the Quran says that you cannot have any marriage with idolaters, because it is important that the concept of monotheism or the concept of Tawheed is absolutely is clearly understood and comprehended by people who are getting married and they believe in this creed. So the Quran has forbidden marriages with people who subscribe to polytheism. And the Quranic words are, "And wed not idolatrous women unless they embrace faith, and remember a believing slave girl is better than an idolatrous woman, although you may fancy her. And wed not your women to the idolaters unless they embrace faith, and remember a believing slave is better than an idolater, although you may fancy him." So this is the prohibition which has been clearly it has been stated as far as the Quran is concerned. Now, as far as the Jews and Christians are concerned, we have to understand that although they are incriminated by polytheism, although they commit certain acts of polytheism, but they do not subscribe to polytheism as a religion. They do not say that they believe in multiple gods. They say that they believe in one God. However, the way they say it, of course, is something which is objectionable and not acceptable but nevertheless they subscribe to monotheism in their own peculiar way. And that is why the Quran has said that women of the people, the men of the people of the book, they cannot be married, but women of the people of the book, they are given, Muslims are given, or the believers are given this window of option to, so that they can marry them. And the reason, of course, primarily being that when women get married to men who are from among the people of the book, of course, they live they live under the husband, and the dominant traditions in which they are living are ones in which, of course, the husband's say is something that would be much more be held in sway, and as a result, the family would more be oriented towards the beliefs of the father, and therefore the effects of this deviant monotheism would infiltrate and trickle down into the children as well. However, if the woman is from among the people of the book and the man is a believer as is prescribed by the Quran, then the chances are little. But the important thing, which is something of a prelude to this whole issue of marriage with the people of the book, is that if you look at the Quran, you'll see that this whole issue is mentioned. Even women from the people of the book are only allowed marriage in circumstances or in countries and in societies where religion or Islam holds dominance and its traditions hold dominance. And we say this because this verse is mentioned right after the Quranic verse which says, Al-Yawma Akmaltu Lakum Dinakum, which means that today your religion has been perfected. And right after these verses comes that permission that you can marry women of the people of the book. And the words of the Quran are, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ إِذَا آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ مُحْسِنِينَ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ وَلَا مُتَّخِذِي أَخْدَانٍ. And lawful to you in marriage are also chaste women from among these people of the book before you, when you give them their dowers with the condition that you desire chastity, not lewdness, nor becoming secret paramours. So the important thing that has to be understood here is that as far as marriage is concerned, as far as marriage with the Jews and Christians is concerned, it is not an absolute it's not a blanket permission even given regarding marriage with the women of the people of the book. So this blanket permission, which is generally understood to be present, is an erroneous deduction. The Quran says that marriage with men of the people of the book is not allowed in any case. The Quran is silent, but the way it has presented its whole argument clearly shows that it has lifted the prohibition which was for all idolaters, and that permission has been lifted in the case of the women of the people of the book only, and that too when the women belong to an area in which Islam is dominant, because in that case they would be living under the sway of these dominant traditions. And in case Islam is not a dominant force or religion in that area, then even women of the people of the book should not be married, because you see, the important thing here is that the Quran wants every believer to have a very, very clear concept of monotheism as deep as possible, because on monotheism rests the whole structure of religion, and it wants every single person to be born of a family of believers to be someone who upholds monotheism in a very correct way. And that is why we have to understand that today, for example, people who want to marry women from the people of the book, they generally live in countries like the US or the UK or other countries in which Islam is no longer a dominant force. So it is highly inadvisable in such circumstances to even marry from among the women of the people of the book, because as we can see that the context in which this allowance has been given is once religion had been completed in Arabia, and the whole of Arabia was under the sway of Islamic traditions. Once this had happened, then it was said that now you can marry from among the people of the book, which tells us that even today, if this is to be done, then it has to be done in a situation, in a manner in which the dominant traditions of Islam, they hold sway. Now, there is this narrative which is also generally cited in support of the fact that there is another condition for marriage besides the two that we have discussed earlier on. One, that the women, men and women, I mean, the way marriage has to be conducted, it must be conducted through dower. And the second is that both men and women, both the husband and the wife, have to be chaste. So the third condition, which is sometimes incorporated, is that unless there is permission from the guardians or the parents of the person who are getting, or the people who are getting married, the marriage cannot take place. So we have this narrative which says la nikaha illa bi wali, which means that there is no nikah, there is no marriage except with the permission of the guardian. Now we have to understand that as far as this condition is concerned, this is not a condition, it's not a legal condition, it's not stated in the Quran anywhere. It is stated in Hadith literature, and we have to understand that as far as Hadith literature is concerned, it is always subservient to what the Quran says, and if it adds something to it, then there has to be a broader framework in the light of which it has to be interpreted. So if we take up the whole family system of religion, which religion has prescribed, we find that Islam generally prescribes that it's the marriage which is to take place. It's not just between the husband and wife. It has to take place actually between two families. They are brought together, and in such a case, if there is some hindrance in the case of the parents, then there has to be some good reason. So basically, the narrative which says la nikaha illa bi wali has to be translated in its proper way, and that is no nikah should not be done unless there is the permission of the wali in normal circumstances, which means that of course that to safeguard this effect that the two families are getting together, this step has been taken as a recommendation. Other than that, we have to understand that as far as the permission to marry is concerned, it is not the guardians or the parents of the two spouses or would-be spouses who decide whether they should get married or not. It is the absolute consent of the free consent of the two who are getting married. So la nikaha illa bi wali is just explaining an aspect, and it is telling everyone that in normal circumstances, because of the social setup which is envisaged by Islam, marriage should take place in the presence of elders and of course with their permission. But this doesn't mean that if they don't give permission, then the spouses or the would-be spouses, they cannot marry. It only means it's a recommendation. We have to understand Hadith in its background. It cannot give you a new directive. It cannot add any directive to what the Quran has already said. The Quran has just specified two conditions. When we see this third condition as being mentioned in Hadith, and it has to be interpreted in the broad framework of religion and would actually refer to a recommendation. And once again, as I said, it subscribes and prescribes the fact that in normal circumstances, because of the fact that it's not just the husband and wife who are getting married, and the child who will be born to them is not just someone that they can cater or take care of. It's like that whole family setup that should come together to look after the newborn baby when he arrives or she arrives. And this can only happen when, of course, normally marriages happen with the consent of the parents. Other than that, the consent it's not a legal requirement. It's like a social recommendation. Otherwise, I can let me just quote before you certain aspects of the Prophet's life as well as his own recommendations, in which he has said that he has cited how consent is so important. So in one of the narratives, Abdullah ibn Abbas narrates from the Prophet, a widow can take her decision herself, and permission must be sought from a virgin. Bint Khuzam says, when she became a widow, her father solemnized her marriage. She did not like the decision. She came over to the Prophet and gave her the permission to revoke her marriage. So you see that when her father had solemnized the marriage on her behalf, and she herself did not like this, so she came to the Prophet, and the Prophet said, it is your decision. It is your decision, and he had the decision revoked, and the father was told that, well, he could not do so on behalf of of herself. So it is to be considered the fact that these bounds and conditions of marriage which are mentioned in the Quran are very important. They have to be understood in the light of what we have just read in the Quran. Next, we come to the topic which relates to the rights and obligations of the spouses. And for this, I'm going to quote you the 34th verse of Surah Nisa, as has been cited by Ustaz Javed Ghamidi in his chapter on social Shari'ah, in which these rights and obligations of the spouses are discussed. I'm just going to read out the translation of this verse before you, and this is an important area that we have to understand in a very comprehensive way, because of some of the misunderstandings that have resulted by not understanding the true import of this verse. So the words are, men are the guardians of women because God has given the one more preference over the other, and because they financially support them. Consequently, pious women are obedient to their husbands and keep their secrets, for Allah also keeps secrets. And as for those from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them first, and next refuse to share their beds. And even then, if they do not listen, punish them. Then if they do obey you, take no further action against them. Indeed, Allah is exalted and mighty. So this verse, which is a very, very comprehensive verse, it calls for some detailed discussion and explanation. You can see that this verse has very comprehensively covered two areas in which we need to be very careful. The first area relates to the structure of the family, which has been described here. And the second, of course, is also a corollary of that structure. And as a result, we can see that the corollary of the structure itself tells us that how important it is to preserve the family structure as far as possible. So this preservation of the family structure is something that we are going to talk about in this section. So the two things that are mentioned as a result of the fact that husbands are given the status of qawwam. So the Quranic words are الرجال قوامون على النساء, which means that husbands are the qawwam of their wives, which means that they are guardians of their wives. They are, in other words, they are the head of the family in this family unit. And the Quran has actually outlined two important reasons for this purpose, and these two important reasons have to be understood. One of them I have already referred to, but I'm going to explain that reason again. So the words are بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, which means that husbands are given the status of the head of the family for the first reason, and the first reason is بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, that generally, temperamentally, psychologically, physically, husbands are more suited for this task to head the family. Their psychological, their physiological, their temperament, their whole, the way they are created and made and mentally formed makes them a more suitable choice in general to head the family. This is the first thing which is stated. The second thing which is stated is وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, that they are responsible to be the financial breadrunners of their family. So in other words, that what we discussed earlier on in the chapter on meher, in which it was said that this meher or the sadaqah or the dower is a symbolism to the fact that the husband is taking up the responsibility of financially running the affairs of the family, is what we discussed earlier on. So now we are discussing the structure of the family as has the Quran just described. So the first thing is that husbands are given, or they are invested with the status of the head of the family because they are more suitable for this task, which is the first thing. And the second thing is that they are responsible for financially earning for the family. And when this is the case, then they have to understand that as far as financially earning for the family is concerned, this is something which has to be done in a manner that it is absolutely befitting. And when we say that it is absolutely befitting, it means that as far as husbands are concerned, they are going to be generous in this maintenance. They are going to provide not only for the children and for the household affairs like expenses of the kitchen, etc., but also as a good maintenance for their own wives, which of course refers to their own pocket money. So wives have to be given their maintenance in the form of a pocket money, and wives, if they are running the house, also they have to be given the financial expenses for that. But this doesn't mean that a wife is responsible to cook food or maybe iron clothes or raise the children the way people generally think. It only means that as far as earning for the family is concerned, it is the responsibility of the husband. As far as the structure of the organization or the administration of the house is concerned, this is something which the Sharia has not touched upon, and it has left this particular area to the discretion of the husband and wife. For example, the husband could manage the house, he could use some help, the wife could do so, she could use some help as well, or both can play their own part, they can share the responsibilities, but not in any case should it be understood or ever concluded that wives are to manage the house as well. So this management of the house is not mentioned in the Quran. All that the Quran mentions is that the financial burden of the family is on the husband. The structure and administration of the house itself is something which the two can mutually decide. They can leave it to their own culture, they can leave it to their own understanding. The Sharia has not in any way bound them, and this is erroneous to think that Islam in any way has regulated the fact that women are to manage the house in any way. This is not discussed anyway. The management of the house and household affairs, as I said, is something which is left to their own mutual understanding. A few words regarding this maintenance that also need to be understood is that wives, they must be given their own maintenance, their own pocket money in a very respectable way, in a way that they are not made to beg and ask every time from their husband. It should be given preferably as a lump sum amount at the beginning of each month, and also with regular increments, keeping in view various inflationary adjustments should be made. And at the same time, if the wife is earning, this doesn't mean that the husband is not responsible of giving her the pocket money, unless of course she herself forgoes it or forfeits it. Other than that, the husband has no right on whatever the wife is earning, or he cannot say that since you are earning, so therefore I'm not going to support you. This is entirely the decision of the wife. If she feels, she can maybe give some concession or not take anything at all, but it is her right to be supported in spite of earning herself. So this is an area in which our most Muslim countries, third world Muslim countries in particular, they suffer a lot of abuse. Women or wives, they suffer a lot of abuse at the hands of men in this regard. And if you ask me, I can tell you that a lot of disputes which arise between a husband and wife, in family affairs, in affairs which relate to domestic issues, and at times the situation reaches as critical as divorce. If you ask me one particular area, then I would say it is this attitude of the husband in particular. In most, I'm not singling out all husbands, but I can say most husbands, that they the way they run their affairs and the way they are made responsible in a way that they should generously contribute for the needs of the wife and for the family. This doesn't happen, and ultimately there is this altercation between the husband and wife, and as I said, unfortunately on many occasions the reason for divorce is this lack of support or lack of proper support which a husband should provide in financial means, and the wife generally has to suffer at his hands, unless of course she is herself independent. So it is essential. Now the next part of the Quranic verse is also something which is a lot of, which has been brought into a lot of debate in these current circumstances, because it touches upon the issue of wife beating or punishing the wife in a physical way. And this is something which is absolutely, of course, not acceptable to many Muslim minds today. And in order to make sense of this directive, I need to delve a little more into the background of this narrative and also of this directive, and also some of the background in which this directive was revealed. So we must remember that the Quran was revealed in a society which was feudal, which was tribal in its essence, in its outlook. And in tribal societies, there are certain norms which are followed, which many urban societies of today cannot even think of. So we have to understand that the most important thing which the Quran wants is to preserve marriage once it has taken place. Once marriage has taken place, it wants the marriage bond to survive and to remain there as far as possible, as long as possible, and it should not break. And for this reason, at times it says that if a slight physical chastisement or physical punishment can make that bond survive and remain intact, then even that should be used. So we have to understand that the stress and the emphasis of the Quran is this: to stop the family from breaking. And for this, it has suggested that if women or wives in particular, they become rebellious in the family setup. And what do we mean when we say that wives become rebellious? It actually means that they assume or they would like to assume the position of being the head of the family. And because of the fact that there cannot exist two heads of the family at the same time, the husband cannot be the head and the wife could not be the head. We just cannot have two people looking after the same thing with the same status. So the Quran says, وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ, that when you fear any rebellion, when you think that your wife is going to rebel against this system, then you have to make her understand that this is not the right way. Because we just as a state cannot have two heads of state, in a similar way a family setup cannot have two heads at the same time. And the Quran says that instead of the family setup breaking up and two heads assuming the same position, it is much better to tell the person or the individual who was to remain subservient, so to speak, to mend her ways. So the Quran says the first thing that the husbands must do is fa'izuhunna, which means that they should counsel their wives and they should tell them that, look here, if a husband has been installed as the head of the family setup and the social setup, then there is a reason for this. The Quran has spelled out that reason. It is not at all wise to challenge his authority. And when we say that you have to challenge his authority, of course, this doesn't mean that the husband is always going to misuse his authority and stamp his authority in all decisions. In normal circumstances, religion requires that the husband runs the affairs of the family in a democratic way, in a way that he takes the wife into confidence when any major decision is to be taken. And if there is a difference of opinion, then the best way out is that whoever has a better and a more logically convincing view, his or her view should be accepted, and this is how a family should move along. But then you see there could be instances in which there could be a deadlock, and you just cannot have this final say that whose decision is correct. At times both decisions have their own merits, but you have to move along in life. You just cannot live in a deadlock. So when there is a deadlock in a particular matter, then the position of the head demands that the carte blanche or the casting vote should be given to the person who is the head of the family. So it's not that men have been invested with this final vote. It is the head of the family who has been invested with this final vote. Had the head of the family, had women been more suitable for this position, she would have been given this authority. So the important thing that we have to understand here is that in case of a deadlock in a major decision, when there is no headway, then the person who is the head of the family is given this responsibility or this privilege that his decision is going to prevail. That is all. And therefore, in such situations, it doesn't always mean that the husband is always correct because he's making his decision to prevail. No, it only means that if there is a deadlock, then someone's view has to be accepted. The Quran says that the view of that person should be accepted who is invested with the position of the head of the family. So if the wife starts to challenge this authority of the husband, the Quran says the first thing that should be done by the husband is to counsel his wife, is to tell his wife that this is not the right attitude, because this would be entirely unbecoming of her, and this would disrupt the whole family system. And sufficient time should elapse on this, and the husband should take some more time. He should try to give these words of counsel in various ways, in various styles, in various times, so that he can drive his point home. But let's say after some time this doesn't happen, then the Quran says the next step is وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, which means that they should be left alone in their beds, implying the fact that there should be no sexual contact, there should be no marital contact between the husband and wife, again signaling the fact that this is an expression of displeasure by the husband, that challenging the authority, challenging or rebelling against authority is not something right. And this is like, again, something which would make the wife realize that she's not doing the right thing. And again, this should happen for a long time, or for a considerable period of time, I would say, so that the point once again is driven home. So this is the next step, or the second step. And the third step, which the Quran again has suggested. So we have to make this very clear in our minds, that it has not made these steps as obligatory, as mandatory. It has suggested that these steps can be taken in order to avoid and preserve the family setup from breaking up. So it's basically a whole procedure that has been laid down to stop the family from breaking. And the third suggestion which the Quran has given in this regard is that even now, even after this second step, that the wife is left alone and there is no sexual contact with her, even then if she does not realize, then the Quran says that you can physically chastise your wife. Of course, this is more of a corrective behavior, in which, like just as a teacher punishes an unruly student, in a very similar way, husbands are given this authority that, well, if they think that matters are reaching the situation that this slight chastisement on their part might make their wife realize that she's doing a wrong thing, then they can also do this. But remember, they can do this. It's not that they must do it. So when I was talking about this verse earlier on, I referred you to the fact that the Quran was revealed in a tribal society. And in a tribal society, raising one's hand against one's wife or punishing her in this manner was, on many occasions, instrumental in stopping her from showing that rebellious behavior, and hence hastening the breakup of the family. But as you see, and the Quran was not just meant for tribal societies. It was revealed in a tribal society, but of course it was meant for all types of societies. Today, however, we are living in an urban society. In an urban society, the norms have completely changed. And the third measure which is suggested here to physically chastise the wife, it might, or in most cases, I can clearly say, and I think you would agree, it would prove counterproductive. And if you start punishing your wife, instead of being able to preserve the family setup, this step which is taken to punish the wife would only hasten to break it up even further. And the wife would immediately maybe take a punitive measure. She might retaliate. She might just leave the house, and the thing that was meant to be stopped is actually hastened. So the important thing here to realize is that the Quran has given these suggestive measures in order to stop the family from breaking up. But as I said, in tribal societies, these measures could have and were effective. But in urban societies, it's not a given that these will be equally effective, especially the last one. So if a person does not use the last measure, it is absolutely fine. So what we have to understand is that this is a procedure laid out by the Quran, keeping in view the situation of a society, our own circumstances, and wisdom and common sense, that if this measure can be used to stop the family from breaking, it should be adopted. And if there is any chance, when I say any chance, I think in our urban societies, maybe there is a 99.9% chance that adopting this measure might break up the family even further or hasten its breakup, then it is not at all wise to adopt this procedure. So the important thing is that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has signaled that if there is this this instance in which your wife challenges your authority, then yes, you can chastise her ultimately if the situation arises. But even before that, one of the things that I'd like you to focus on is that the Quran has said, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ, which means that pious wives, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ, they are ones who guard the secrets of their husbands. Because God guards secrets, bima hafizallah. So the first thing which is expected of a pious wife is that he should or she should be a very good confidant of her husband. Of course, this goes in the reciprocal way as well. Many husbands also should have the same attitude. They also must not expose the secrets of their wives. But here, in particular, it is said that if wives would like to expose what their husbands are from inside, because you see, every wife is privy to what her husband is, then she can really humiliate the husband in front of the society, and such humiliation might satisfy her ego, but it would not maybe be very helpful in mending the situation. So the Quran says that the proper way is that she should not expose these shortcomings or these things before the society, and maybe try her best personally to reform him. And of course, if matters reach the situation that this cannot be done, then she can take other steps. Otherwise, what the Quran is implying here is that exposing the secrets of your husband in the society is something which is not going to help at all the cause of the family. And the second thing is what I just mentioned here, that the Quran has said very explicitly that if husbands fear that their wives are going to rebel against the system of authority, then they can take these steps. So the important thing which we have also to realize is that the second part of this family setup is mentioned in the 19th verse of Surah Nisa, which I'll just read out and explain to you a little, after which inshallah we'll take questions on the material that we have covered, and we'll do the remaining part in our next sessions. So it says, believers, you are forbidden to forcibly inherit women, nor by treating them with harshness should you take away part of what you have given them, except where they have been guilty of open lewdness, and live with them befittingly. Because if you dislike them, it may well be you dislike a thing, and Allah brings about through it a great deal of good. So the first thing which Ustaz Javed Ghamidi has said is pointed out in this verse is that women are not assets or animals which a person may inherit and then use them the way he likes. They too are human beings who have an independent personality. So this was something which happened in the times of the Prophet, that men would inherit their husbands' wives, of course, their stepmothers, and they would become their own. They would come under their own ownership, and they would marry their stepmothers. So this is something which has been stopped henceforth in a very explicit way. The second thing which is stressed is that even if a believer dislikes his wife, he should not subject her to harsh treatment in order to recover any wealth or property that he has gifted her. Such an attitude can only be accepted if the wife is guilty of open sexual transgression. If the wife is not guilty of such behavior and is living as a faithful and obedient lady, leading a virtuous life, it is totally against justice and decency for the husband to harass her merely because he dislikes her. No doubt, if a wife shows moral misconduct, then this is a detestable thing. But no husband is allowed to deprive her of a decent living because he does not like her looks or because her temperament is different from his. The third thing which is emphasized here is that a husband who does not like his wife should deal with her in accordance with the norms of justice and equity, graciousness and decency to which his own nature testifies. The words used in the verse to convey this meaning are وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. The word ma'ruf implies good conventions and traditions of a society. In other words, the Quran instructs a husband to adopt a befitting attitude with his wife in accordance with the good traditions of the society, whether he likes her or not. He is told that if he treats her nicely in spite of his aversion to her, he might win the blessings of the Almighty both in this world and in the hereafter. So we have to take this into consideration, that as far as inheriting stepmothers are concerned, this is an absolutely detestable practice which has been stopped. And secondly, If a person dislikes her wife in any way, then he should always remember, as the Quran has said, Ashiruhunna bil ma'ruf. You live with them in a magnanimous way, live with them in a befitting way, because God, as the verse says, Asa in karihtumuhunna. If you dislike her, it may well be that God brings ease for you. Yajalallahu lahunna fihi khairan kathira. That God creates a lot of good for you. So this should not be the case, that you should detest your wives. If you detest your wives, you start to maltreat them, or to bring them to a certain point in which they can, of course, have no option but to depart from the family. So these rights and obligations have another part also, inshallah, which relates to sexual intimacy, and this we shall discuss in our next sessions, which will be coming up later on. So I'm going to end my discussion here of the social Sharia. Up till now, what we have discussed, of course, are the bounds and conditions of nikah, and also the rights and obligations. As far as these rights and obligations are concerned, we have discussed the family setup, and we have discussed the issue of how the management of the house is concerned, as well as some of the conditions and stipulations of the family setup. One part of this is, of course, relates to the intimate sexual details, or the sexual intimacy between husband and wife as well. That, inshallah, we'll be discussing in our next sessions. So if you have any questions on what we have discussed today, please raise them now.
Okay, Riaz, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum assalam.
So the Shari Meher, whatever is there, I mean, is it from where it comes? If it has to be decided between the husband and wife, so
it has absolutely no basis. Actually, the meher which was given by Ali radhiyallahu anhu to his wife Fatima has generally been thought as it's the legally binding meher, and people think that is the amount that we should stick to. It is not correct. You see, the Quran has said that the meher has to be given bil ma'ruf, which means according to the ma'ruf, according to the customs of the society. Now, these customs they change with the society, they change with era to era, with various periods of time. So there is no such thing as a legally binding amount which we have to adhere to. People wrongly think that the meher which Ali gave to his wife Fatima is the one that is legally, we are legally bound to follow it. He was just following the customs of his own society. So we have to understand that the Quran has said that you follow the customs. So whatever the custom is in our society is to be followed. It could be different in different societies, it could be the same, it could vary, it could develop, it could evolve. So today, as far as meher is concerned, every person who is living in a society should see that what exactly is that maruf or that convention in the society that he is living in. There is no such thing as a legally binding amount as far as meher is concerned. It is left to the conventions and the maruf of the society.
Thank you.
Thank you. Asif Ali, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. So the question is related to the Institute of Marriage, which we are discussing, and we believe that the Institute of Marriage is basically, or the way the nikah should be done is the sunnah, and all the obligations, rights and obligations are discussed in Quran. But if you see, the human wisdom, the method and the way the Institute of Marriage is developed over the centuries, why specifically we need to follow all these sunnah and this obligation, rights and obligations? Because those people who doesn't believe in Quran and the sunnah, they also have developed this marriage institute in such a way that now the rights of women, especially in the Western societies, are well preserved and they are well taken care of.
Well, I think the answer is very simple. If you are followers of the Quran, and either you follow the Quran or you say that the directives of the Quran do not belong to this era, or you say something else. So for a believer who is going to follow the Quran and he finds a directive given to him regarding a certain aspect of life, then he should have a mighty good reason to not follow it. Either he should say that particular directive does not belong to today's society, it was meant for the Prophet society. Okay, this could be a discussion, we'll have that discussion. But if he says that yes, these are directives of the Quran, but I'm not going to follow them, or I have my own views, or I can follow what the world is doing, This would be audacity on his part. I mean, you have to have some rules for your own self. Either you are a believer, you follow the Quran, then you follow what the Quran says, or you, I mean, have some other interpretation of these directives. So I think that unless you either disown the Quran or you think that that a particular directive of the Quran no longer applies to our society, in the absence of either of these two cases, we don't have any option but to follow the Quran.
Oh, my question is not exactly like that. My question is that in the Western society, the marriage institute has developed where the women's rights are basically, I mean, the advocates, and the way over the centuries, it has been quite different than what actually Quran right now is saying to us in the context of the tribal society. So how we should reconcile between the two? If I'm the believer, and the ayah you just posted is that the recommendation is that in case of some issues within the man and woman, I should this and do that. But the Western society over the centuries has developed, no, you should not be doing this because the women are like this or women are like that. So how we should reconcile between the two?
Well, I have just given you this answer that reconciliation cannot take place if the Quran had asked you to do something at all cost. For example, to preserve the family setup, it has given you an alternative. It has suggested to you an alternative that you can go as far as chastising your wife. But it's not saying that it is an obligation or is it mandatory. It tells you to use your sense and the society that you're living in if you are to exercise this right. So if you are doing so without realizing the era in which you're living and the society that you're living, then what you're doing is yet you are not understanding what the Quran has told you, and at times you are misusing those directives. So the Quran is given those directives in the light of a certain background, and if you start using them in the absence of that background, you will be guilty of not understanding the Quran. So for that, they need to understand the Quran. And I can assure you from my study that whatever women empowerment today has taken place in the last couple of centuries, it is as far as it can be seen as a development for women. I can assure you that they'll not find any hindrance in that development in any directive of the Quran. The Quran supports them to do all they would like to do, to become professionals, to pursue a career, to become contributing individuals, to be strong, to be people who are able to contribute in a positive way. So everything that you can talk about the contribution of a man, in a very similar sense, you can see that women also can contribute. The only thing is that in a family setup, when there are two people together, then there has to be some deciding authority in the case of a deadlock. You see, in most cases, these deadlocks may not arise. I mean, one opinion could be better than the other opinion, and the spouses would go along with the better opinion. But you see, there's always this possibility that two equal opinions collide and there's a deadlock. So it is here that the Quran says that whenever there is a deadlock and you cannot remove that deadlock, then the head of the family, the opinion of the head of the family is to prevail. In the Western society, we do not find any such formula. So yes, they have developed a lot, but in case of a deadlock, either a relationship becomes strained, or matters reach the situation of a divorce, or in the first place, marriages don't even take place because of the stringent laws of divorce in our Western societies. You would be knowing that in most Christian countries or countries which follow Christian law, there is this very strong embargo on divorce, because in their laws, divorce can only take place if either of the spouses is guilty of sexual misconduct. They cannot divorce each other for any other reason. So for that reason, you'll find that divorces, since they cannot take place, so they don't even marry in the first place. And then there are a number of other issues as well. So if you yourself compare these issues, you'll see that I think the medium through which the Quran has communicated its import is such that it gives you that balanced and moderate attitude in which you are not subjected to two extremes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a question. So what constitutes as the secrets of the husband, and does the husband not have to keep any wife's secrets?
So I just answered that earlier on when I said that this is like a reciprocation. It's not that the husbands are not required to keep. It's just that the women are addressed in on this occasion, because you see, when a woman would like to humiliate her husband before the society, the amount of secrets that she might have are I mean, far more maybe, and so therefore she is advised that if there is something that she'd like to reform in in her husband, then it should not be made public talk, because once you bring these things to the public, then there is this chance of the family breaking up, because I mean, it's like the privacy being invaded, and this should only be done when things just cannot be controlled. So for efficient living, for graceful living, for elegant living, women are advised that they should guard the secrets of their husband. Meaning that, I mean, reforming them by humiliating them in the public is not going to happen. And of course, this does not mean that the husbands have not been asked to reciprocate. You see, at times the Quran gives the directive to both genders, but addresses them to one gender, which is liable at times more to falter, or has more importance in the eyes of the Quran. So yes, the directive is addressed to both genders, and as far as these secrets are concerned, they obviously, we know what these secrets are. In things that are between husband and wife, they should remain between the husband and wife. And if they start becoming talk of the town, then you see that element of privacy, that element of chastity and modesty, it starts to disintegrate, and the whole integral part of the society, of a family, which is that cohesiveness, that adhesiveness between the spouses, it stands to question then.
The issue arises is that, for example, when you have a couple and they're not, for example, able to have a kid, a lot of the times the society usually thinks it's the woman's fault, right? That she's infertile. And then there have been, or at least I know some women that have kept silent about it, but it's after doing tests, it was clearly found out that it was the husband, but they wouldn't say it.
Right. So, I mean, this issue doesn't come in guarding the secrets. I mean, this is an entirely different issue. This is something which relates to your own family setup. And if the husband is not taking that test and the wife is being blamed as the person who is infertile, I mean, this is an entirely different affair. The secrets here means those shortcomings maybe, or those mistakes or faults that you might commit as a husband, as the responsibility that you have as a husband. So that is what is being talked about here, that the Quran would like that you try to reform your husband directly in a personal way, in matters which relate to a husband and wife. But the matter that you have raised, of course, it doesn't come in this ambit. It is an entirely different thing.
Thank you for the clarification. There's a question in the chat that's asking, don't the divorce laws only apply in the Catholic sect?
Yeah, it does.
Riaz, please go ahead.
Dr. It says "Ankihul ayama." I mean, it means the Surah Nur. Does it mean the singles? Just only singles are allowed to do nikah,
right? And
it includes both men and women.
It includes both men and women, and it includes people who are bachelors. The society is encouraged.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the Quran also allows the husband to marry more than one. So is it that there is some specific condition for marrying more than one?
We'll be discussing polygamy in one of our future sessions independently. It will be discussed in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the questions today.